this is what you are doing, and it's also why we know that we have relevant experience to share, because it is immediate experience. And we know that we can help you in the support of the conduct of free and fair elections, to support freedom of expression, even when the views expressed may offend some. Freedom of expression applies also in those circumstances. We support work to counter corruption, and we support the work to establish an independent judiciary that upholds the rights of all, that ensures accountability and due process. And in fact, allow me to say that these comments on where we think we can help Bangladesh in its political transition, they are actually extremely important for the European Union, because we need Bangladesh to preserve the space in which we can work to improve our relationship. So, I move on. We offer more profound security cooperation. We're working on port safety with Bangladesh, on maritime security as well. But given the level of insecurity in this world, we want to also see military-to-military cooperation between the EU military staff and the military here in Bangladesh. We are working also on countering terrorism, countering extremism across the region, and that is equally an important area for us to continue to cooperate. When it comes to migration, we support safe, dignified and regular migration. More often than not, unfortunately, migration can be irregular, undignified and extremely dangerous. We prefer to look for legal pathways for migration, even if this is on a small scale. Because what happens currently, regrettably, is that more often than not, poor migrants try to reach Europe with a dream of prosperity, which we can all understand, but they are in fact exploited by traffickers and smugglers along the way, and they even lose their lives. And this is something that we need to put order into, and it's a shared interest, I think, between the EU and Bangladesh, but also between us and journalism. Because responsible journalism, informing migrants about the risks or about the opportunities, is something that is extremely important to us. The EU is open for fair business. It is clearly the case. We will continue to work towards ensuring a smooth graduation from presidency status for Bangladesh. We do support an ambitious labour reform agenda here, including long overdue improvements in terms of inspection, the elimination of child labour, or the right of workers to organise, promote greater diversification of your economy and the creation of greater economic value added in this country, not in countries where you export semi-finished goods to, and not in countries where you import raw materials from. You need a more complex value chain, in our view, where you are building wealth for your citizens who are very talented. We are, in return, expecting a level playing of our trade and our investment, a level playing. So we need your economy to open up in sectors where our private sector can bring world-class technology. We need you to understand, your authorities to understand that of course we have economic needs. And we also have a very significant trade deficit. That is not our obsession. We do want to see greater trade and investment between the EU and Bangladesh going in this direction. I want to turn to perhaps the fact that we are already a partner in investment, but it's not on the same scale as our trading relationship. We want to increase it. And this partnership in investment takes the form of foreign direct investment, as you might imagine, but equally we are still here investing, funding in infrastructure development. areas and in energy, all areas where we think that we can, in fact, partner with Bangladesh to ensure that you have the platform on which your own companies will thrive in the future. So, let me say that regional cooperation is a very important element of this work on infrastructure for us. So, disaster preparedness, development cooperation, these are the traditional lenses through which you view the relationship with the European Union. We are still here as your steadfast partner. I can tell you that we are investing in better healthcare, education skills, and also social security in the country. But I'm trying to illustrate with my earlier comments just how broad the relationship already is and the fact that we have offers to do more with you, such as on security cooperation. The last thing I want to say is how important it is that we work together on climate change. So we don't think anyone can be left behind when it comes to clean energy transition. We think it's extremely important that Bangladesh has more ambition when it comes to its green transition, because this will also be part of your future market access to the European Union, which we want to preserve and improve. And as I said already, but I think it bears saying one more time, when it comes to climate change, the European Union are on the same boat as you, because you are climate vulnerable, and you have the fastest growing continent on Earth. So let me just say, we are listening to you. We are holding dialogues with young people as well. I'm trying to not sit always behind the desk, but sometimes I am, and I'm very happy to be with you today and to listen to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. We will now go for a question and answer session. You can take 3 questions together, or you want to answer one by one. He is our former president and also representing.
Yes, you know, the lots of debate is going on for the sending humanitarian to the Rakhine state of Myanmar through Bangladesh. So yesterday our national security advisor said that it is not the humanitarian corridor, but rather it is humanitarian passage. Do you have any idea about the difference of the corridor and the passage? And the second thing is the UN local officers say that we can only use this passage or corridor to provide assistance to Rakhine if the two governments, Bangladesh and the Myanmar government, agree on. But the Myanmar government already expressed their disappointment about Bangladesh trying to establish contact with Myanmar army. So is it actually possible to implement this corridor or passage? And if so, will it pose any threat to Bangladesh security if it is implemented?
Excellency, thank you very much. My name is Bashir Ahmed Arab for the Bangladesh. As you are aware, what happened in last year, July, August, according to Transparency report of the United Nations, at least 1,400 people, including child and women, were killed. And the UN strongly recommended to all the perpetrators involved in this genocide must be held accountable and face the trial. What is the UN position, EU position on this issue? Thank you.
Mustafa Ismail from New Age. You can.
refer to the first question, I will have some addition to that question. What is your position on Rohingya crisis at present? Because it seems it's getting more complex, and Bangladesh is under fresh pressure to get more Rohingya to recognize new arrivals even. So what is your position in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. My name is Bhushan Hasib. I work for Channel 24. So following Mr. Bashir Bhai's question that UN fact-finding has mission sorted out, it was systematic violation of human rights, as EU stands for human rights, and that's the basis of EU relationships throughout the world. We, EU, categorically recognize the political party as indeed some terrorist activists to systematically done the human rights violation in coming future. And the second part of the question is, as you are meeting so many other political leaders, do you find after the 5th August there is a political breathing space among the parties, or they're still struggling to proceed?
Thank you very much for interesting views of the European Union on these very significant matters. What I would like to start with is the renewed trust we recognize and enormous effort being made by the Norwegians to showing refugees from violence across the world. And also recognize that there are even new arrivals to this day, which illustrates that violence continues and that Rohingya living in the Rakhine State still feel insecure. So unfortunately, this is a crisis that goes on and on and on, despite the best efforts of Bangladesh and of partners like the European Union, where we are indeed trying very hard to support a political solution, which is the only solution to this crisis. We, the European Union, have imposed sanctions on members of the European Union. We impose sanctions on those we consider to be perpetrating acts of unbelievable violence and cruelty on their own population, on the other side of the border. But allow me to speak a bit beyond the political wish we have to see a solution. So, in very practical terms, we are standing alongside your authorities in helping cope with the refugee crisis in Cox's Bazar. We have contributed over €500 million in humanitarian assistance since this wave of refugees started to come to your country. And the problem is that humanitarian assistance, once it's spent, it's gone. And what we are trying to do is to keep people's heads above water all the time. And given what we see currently in terms of the funding needs, there is an enormous cliff in financing. So work is going on to try to prioritize what the international community can fund. What is a priority for the European Union is to stretch our funding as far as it possibly can go in terms of meeting the needs on the ground. This is why we are exploring with your government how we can try to give the skills to the refugees while they're here to be more self-reliant, so that when they go back, when circumstances might not exist for them to return, they will be able themselves to not be dependent on aid on the other side of the border, but to be able to look after themselves. What I have to say, and it's very important, is that we have many conversations with the Bangladeshi authorities. Those conversations always conclude with a common understanding that return in circumstances where their lives are at risk. Now, the question on the definition of a corridor versus the definition of a passage, I am unable to give you an inside information What I can tell you is that as a humanitarian, how we can meet the needs of the refugees. If the refugees are here, we will meet their needs here. If they are on the other side of the border, because the situation might one day improve, also look at how we can channel assistance to them there, because it can be cross-border. We have done cross-border assistance in other parts of the world, and it can work. But it can only work when individuals are safe on the side of the border and when governments agree. And those are the conditions. You cannot have a situation in which try to work in a cross-border way, but it merely attracts attention through violence, perpetrators of crimes. So these are the caveats that I would want to see in your place. Now, the second sort of set of questions, I think, were around the uprising of last year, and accountability, and the crimes that have been perpetrated in the context of the uprising, but actually also in the years preceding the events of last summer. So here, what I would want to say is that we do, of course, support the work of the UN fact-finding mission. Their report was exceptionally good. And now the next step is for the judicial authorities and the commission to hold those who are accused of criminal acts responsible. So that has to be done. And I think when I look at the situation here, ahead, to the next stage of the transition, I think if an individual is accused of a serious crime, there should be evidence. If there is evidence, then those individuals should be brought to trial. If there is a trial, it should not be with undue delay. It should not be on the basis of charges which are imprecise. It should be according to what I would consider to be very clear standards that should apply in all judiciaries. And that is the way I hope that Bangladesh will deal with the challenges of the conditions of people which you have done, and it's been very terrible crimes that have been perpetrated. Accountability must be transparent, and it must be fair, and it should respect the rights of every single person in due process. There was a question, I think, on political parties working together. Did I understand the question correctly? So do I see that the political parties have space to work together? So I think it is a very good question, because the political parties are in this political transition, very supportive of the military government, but also looking to see how we can maximize the support, create a bit of elbow room in the context of democratic elections, which will take place sooner or later. So there is maybe not attention between these two issues, but of course you see that different voices in the political parties feel the need to speak up and argue the case for the political support that they want to in future elections. What I see, though, is that there is a process ongoing in this NCC commission, chaired by Professor Yunus, with the Deputy Yunus, which is trying very hard to build the consensus between political parties that is going to be needed if you are going to take forward ambitious and profound reforms on very important issues in the short term. The European Union, as I said, can support an ambitious reform agenda, and we are waiting for the political parties and the interim government to agree on what we hope will be a very clearly prioritized specific list of reforms that we can then get back. As I mentioned, I think we do have experience which is excellent. We do have financing which can support, and we have the political will to stand in this.
Genocide from German television.
Excellency, thank you for joining us. My name is Vishwa. I work for Jamuna TV. My question is about you are working with our election commission to strengthen the capacity of election officers and other logistics support. Can you please give us a brief idea about the project going on with Election Commission? I mean, when the project will start and when it will be finished, and what are the activities under the Election Commission standing project?
My name is Shamol. There are several countries in the European Union, and to take their visas, you need to go in third country right now. But for the visa obstacles, in third country, so we cannot take this visa. And you are very, I think this is another obstacle for our migration and safe migration also. So, do you have any initiative to take these visas from Bangladesh
Masud Karim bhai. Thank you very much. My name is Masud Karim. I work for the newspaper. My question is, there is uncertainty looming about the next general election. That the chief advisor said that election will be held from within the January to June next year. But at the same time, he said in an interview with the Al Jazeera, he said that people do not want election at this moment. So it's a contradictory remarks from the chief advisor. Do you think the election will be in a stipulated time? What is your expectation? This is one, and if the election will be the inclusive one. Purimal Palman, Daily Star. He is our former president.
My question is the Transparency International recently, I think last September, has asked the European Union to impose section against the former ministers, public representatives and others who have misappropriated huge amount of wealth from Bangladesh and now staying behind European Union member countries. The Transparency International also asked the European Union to freeze their assets. They put in different kinds of European Union countries and recover those money and send it into them under the government, to help the Indian government around that. Is there any update regarding this?
Good morning, this is Purimal Palma from the Daily Star. So I have two questions. One is, you spoke about security cooperation in Bangladesh, between Bangladesh and the European Union, where you also mentioned military to military cooperation. What actually did you mean by that? And we know that in the Pacific region, especially in the southeastern region of Bangladesh, there is a real security threat developing. And when there has been a lot of discussion on humanitarian channel, there are concerns that global powers will be coming and this and that. So Bangladesh will be sort of fighting a proxy war. And we actually don't see that there's enough pressure on Myanmar from any of the powers. And the burden is being on Bangladesh only. So specifically, what kind of action the EU can take? And as you said, political solution is required. It's not only humanitarian, and it is really not just humanitarian. We also want a political solution. This is number one. And the other one is, there's a Global Gateway Forum, I think, in the coming days. And as Bangladesh now seeks for a lot of investment, what do you have in your mind? And you said that level playing field is required. What are the challenges you find here, or what are the ways out that are there?
Definitely more than 2 questions. Try my best. So, there was a question on our work with the Election Commission. So, indeed, I have been engaging with the chairman, and my colleagues have been engaging the Commission more generally to try to identify where the European Union can be most helpful in supporting the conduct of the elections in line with international standards. So that's where we are. Absolutely want the elections, when they are held, to be ones we can look at and say, this is free and fair, the result is entirely credible and good. And we want to be part of that success story because it will be, if you like, a very significant milestone in your political transition. Not the end of it, I would say, at all, but a very significant milestone. So we are in the process of contracting entities that will work with the Commission on domestic election observation. That will work to ensure that your citizens are aware, they have civic education when it comes to the conduct of democratic elections, and we are also working to make sure that disinformation is not something that we see undermining the free and fair conduct of the campaign. Now, it's not all we're planning to do, but this is what we have in the pipeline at this moment. There was a question about timing, and I think that I have to say that timing is a matter for Bangladesh to take a decision upon. We see this political transition as leading up to democratic elections, so that's the important milestone I mentioned. But as the European Union, we don't have an opinion on time, and we are not pressuring anyone to hold elections on a particular date. We do think that there needs to be sufficient time to implement reforms under this interim government, so we think that that is something where a bit of space needs to exist, and this is why when I spoke earlier about the NCC work, that we think that let us see how much consensus is created according to the timeline we see. Now, there was a question on visas. I think we recognise that it can be a challenge. The challenge has emerged, if you like, since the uprising of last year, because in previous years, many individual citizens would travel to Neighbour to obtain a visa, and that channel is now extremely restricted, if not limited. So we recognise that there is an issue. There is a difference between short-term visas and long-term visas, because short-term visas are issued according to European law, and long-term visas are issued by the member states themselves. So that distinction is important because here in Bangladesh we have 7 member state embassies, and they actually cooperate with member states who are not physically present to issue Schengen visas. So for short-term trips, for visiting journalists or the private sector or academics, that process actually works quite smoothly. For the longer-term visas, we are in a situation where a number of our member states are adapting to the evolving situation, so they would now expect citizens to travel to Bangkok, for example, to obtain visas. I understand your concern, and what I can say now is that we have absolutely internalised the request that we see from many quarters to work more on the issuance of visas here. So we will see what is possible. On the issue of the return or the seizure of assets and its return, so we are as shocked as anyone to see the reports issued from Bangladesh, the extent agriculture sector from your industrial entities in the previous 15 years. When it comes to returning funds, what is very important to stress is that this is not an issue where the EU is going to act. It is our member states who will act. Because if you want the recovery of stolen assets, you need to share with our member state judicial authorities sufficient credible evidence so that the judiciary can